From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Yosef, Parshat Vayechi, letting go. Our question for today is, did Yosef ever completely forgive his brothers for having sold him down to Egypt? Did he ever really let go? We know that in the laws of tshuva, it is important, if you're ever going to get atonement, it's important to give total forgiveness. The Rambam says in the second chapter of the laws of tshuva, Ein ha-tshuva v'lo Yom Kippurim mechaprim. Even tshuva will not work. Even Yom Kippur will not work. Al averot sheben adam l'chaviro. On sins between man and man, between people and people. Unless Ad sheyimchol eino nimchalo. He is not forgiven. Ad sheyiten l'chaviro mashu chayav lo v'yiratzeu. He has to return the various objects that he had offended him for, if he had stolen something. And then, even though he returned it, chayav lo tzarich l'ratzoto. He must get his appeasement. He must appease the friend. Lishol mimen sheyimcholo. He must ask him to forgive him. And then, the other person, asulo liod achsari, the person who is aggrieved, should not be bitter about it, and he should be noach litzod, he should agree to forgive what has been done. The question is, did the brothers ask for forgiveness? Did Yosef give and grant this forgiveness? I heard someone say that actually Yosef is known as Yosef HaTzadik. He is the great righteous tzaddik. Why is he righteous? Is it because he resisted the temptations of the wife of Potiphar? Or is it because he forgave his brothers in a situation where who would forgive in the case like this when his brothers sold him down to Egypt, treated him like a slave, sold him for money, threw him in a pit, rejected him, forgot about him? Who would forgive? But Yosef was a great tzaddik. Or is that not true? Did Yosef completely forgive? At first glance, you look into Parshat today as well as previous Parshiot, and it seems that surely Yosef had forgiven his brothers. After all, he prepared them and he provided for them there in Egypt. And it says in our Parsha that the brothers came to Yosef. They asked him for forgiveness, and he says, don't worry. He spoke on their heart. Vaydaber al libam, vaynachem otam. He comforted them. He said he'll support them. He said that you may have tried to do something bad, but God meant it for the good. Everything turned out so great. And on the surface of it, Yosef forgave the brothers. They were worried that he didn't, but in fact, he did. However, a closer look reveals that in fact, Yosef may not have completely forgiven his brothers, and in some ways he may not have forgiven them at all. This reading is based on Rabbeinu Bachya, a medieval commentator, a student of the Ramban, and this is the approach he takes. He says, if we look carefully, the brothers claim that their father, Yaakov, had asked that Sana Pesha Achecha V'chatatam Kira'ag Malucha. Lift up their sin, forgive their sin. And now lift up that sin. So twice, he asks to lift up the sin, to forgive the sin. Yosef cried. So does Yosef forgive the sin? Does he lift up the sin? He says, don't worry. He says he's not instead of God. He says you thought for bad, but God wants for good. He said that it all turned out well. He said, don't worry. He said he'll provide for them. He comforted them. He spoke to their hearts. But it doesn't say that he actually forgave them. Comes the Rabbeinu Bachya and he says, Lo ra'inu shizkir akatuv mechila Yosef. We don't find that it specifically says that I forgive you, those magic words. V'lo shiodelam shisha b'sha'am v'chatatam. He didn't agree to what they asked, to lift up, to forgive their sins. And in fact, therefore, claims Rabbeinu Bachya, Al keinu tracha ones liot kamus v'chatum lipaked achar zman b'inyan asara harugei malchut. Rabbeinu Bachya says something amazing, remarkable. that because he did not forgive them, he did not let go, therefore, the sin had to be paid for later down the road, generations later, with the slaying of the 10 martyrs of Israel. Many martyrs throughout history would die because of the original sin of the brothers, the sale of Yosef down to Egypt. Had Yosef forgiven them, it would have been erased. The sin would have been gone and forgotten. But since Yosef just couldn't do it, he could provide for them, he could do everything else, but he just could not completely forgive them, and he didn't say those magic words, and therefore the sin was never fully atoned until terrible, terrible suffering had been achieved by the Jewish people. Now, why did they suspect that he, in fact, had not forgiven them? One midrash says that lo zimnan, he didn't invite them to meals. In fact, we have that sense that Yosef was over here in the palace, and the brothers were over there in Goshen, and they didn't meet each other too often. Midrash tries to make excuses for why Yosef did so. He meant well. But one might suggest that he actually put them in the sort of cherem. He put them in a place where I forgive you. I'm not going to talk about our past crimes, but I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to be seen with you. I don't want to speak to you. We find the same thing with Avshalom. David allowed Avshalom to return after having killed his brother Amnon, but David did not allow him an audience with the king. And that is what Yosef did. He allowed them to live in Egypt, but he didn't want to speak to them. In a way, he kind of put them in cherem. He gave them the cold shoulder because he had not completely forgiven them. There's a beautiful story of Yisrael Salanter tells, and I heard this from my cousin and colleague Rabbi Elchanan Adler, that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, when he forgave someone, afterwards he would make sure to give him a job and to make sure that he took care of him. Why? Because if you forgive someone, you have to be completely free of any baggage. This is the challenge of our parsha. Can you let go? Sometimes something aggrieves you, a childhood experience, sometimes someone in the family offends you, someone in your workplace, someone in your life offends you, and you have to let go. Failure to completely let go, says Rabbeinu Bachye, could lead to disaster for generations. Letting go means that not only do you forgive, but it's completely erased. Like Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, someone had offended him, and on the contrary, he went out of his way afterwards to continue to be best friends with that person, to show that he had truly forgiven, to not have the slightest feeling in his heart that he still bore any sort of grudge. This is what it means to let go. Yosef, as wonderful as he was, amazing how Yosef HaTzadik, how he provided for his brothers and his father, and he let them live in Egypt in great wealth. But one thing he couldn't do was to completely let go. And because of that, says Rabbeinu Bachye, the Jewish people suffered for generations because Yosef didn't let go. And the question in our lives is, can we let go? Can we let go of those stings that we get constantly from others? Can we let go of bad feelings we may have about experiences we had earlier on in life? If we can free ourselves. We can free others of their guilt and free ourselves of that sting that could always linger with us, or we could let it go. This is the challenge of our parsha this week. Yosef may have failed in that realm. The question is, can we do better? And in that way, free ourselves of all the angst that comes with not letting go. Thank you for joining us today in our discussions of Parshat Vayechi. Welcome to join us at asb.net to see more about our congregation at the Anshe Sfar Beth El congregation here in Memphis, Tennessee. And feel free to email me at rabbijmf@gmail.com. I want to thank Jason Lefkowitz for making today's presentation possible. Thank you.
Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.